Welcome to the 12th District, ladies and gentlemen. A very special show with a very special guest today. The governor has signed the budget, the $52.5 billion budget, a 17.5% increase over previous budgets, a huge increase by all standards. And that includes 11 new taxes that add up to $27 billion over the next 10 years. That is actual OFM figures out of Olympia. $27 billion over the next 10 years. That is a lot of taxes, and it covers a lot of ground. It goes all the way from payroll taxes to real estate taxes to bank taxes to travel agents and online buyers tax, and of course the two big ones, the B&O tax, which is already quite expensive for business, is severely increased on a number of business types. And then the one that we all are concerned about, property taxes. Two property tax increases, a state increase and a levy increase, both which could cost up to $1.30 per thousand. That's a lot of property tax increase. Well, there's at least one person that isn't happy with all this. I think there's probably a lot more. But there's one person doing something about it, and it's Tim Eyman. Now, he's back. He's already qualified $30 tabs for the ballot, but he is back with Initiative 1648, which would basically sunset all those new taxes. It puts a term limit on taxes is what it does, and there are a lot of people very excited about this particular idea. This is not a new initiative. It's been around a few years, but this is the first time it's been rolled out. Now, the problem he's got is it's only going to be available for signatures until July 5th. That's 320,000+ signatures to get by July 5th. There are several groups organizing, and we'll be talking to some of them over the next few weeks. This is a 30-day, 40-day blitz to get enough signatures to put this on the ballot and roll back that $27 billion in taxes and send a clear message to Olympia that enough is enough. A 17.5% increase in the budget in one term, especially with record revenue, it is just not needed. All right, that and many other things. Of course, we didn't even talk about some of the policy bills like the sanctuary state bill, which is not making people very happy. One of the first sanctuary state bills that have been signed across the United States, making it more difficult for our police officers and immigration people to deal with immigrants and the situation. So we're going to talk about some of those in the coming weeks. But today we are going to stick with the budget and the Initiative 1648. We'll also get an update on the $30 tabs, which will be on your ballot this fall. Do they really cover everything? Is it $30 or is it $30 on some things? We'll find out when Tim Eyman is with us right after this break. Thanks for being with us. This is Kerry Condata. This is the 12th District. Welcome back. As promised, via Skype, we have Tim Eyman, who's back at it again, back on the initiative trail with a brand new initiative. But before we get to that, we want to talk a little bit about one that we've heard of before and has qualified for this fall's campaign, I guess this fall's ballot. Tim, welcome aboard. Good to see you.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, tell me a little bit about $30 tabs, as if we haven't covered that ground before.
No kidding. Obviously everybody who has a vehicle in the state of Washington is paying higher than $30 for their vehicle tabs. That could be your car, your pickup truck, motorcycle, your motorhome. This initiative would bring those car tabs back down to $30, which is what we voted for 2 times before. This will be the 3rd time, and it's on the November ballot. It's already there because a lot of people just busted their butts last year to help it qualify for the ballot. So I'm just really excited that the voters are going to have a chance to vote again to lower their vehicle tabs and get those registration fees back down to $30 the way that we've always wanted.
Now, you said that's on all vehicles. Does that include the Sound Transit area? Because that's where the people are really getting whacked.
It's absolutely true, and it's like a cancer. It will metastasize. They're radically jacking up car tab fees and vehicle fees for everybody in the Puget Sound region, and you just know if they get away with it there, they're eventually going to transport that same idea to the east side of the state. So yeah, it would be $30 for any vehicle anywhere in the state of Washington. And so when you actually register your vehicle, you write a check for $30. So it's a really easy to understand initiative. As far as protecting us in the future, what the initiative does is it says it's $30, but if in the future they ever want to raise vehicle tabs, they got to get voter approval And the only way they can do it based on value is to do it based on Kelley Blue Book, the value of your vehicle, what it actually is, rather than artificially inflating it.
Well, and that's an interesting point because obviously the legislature for several years now has tried to correct that flaw in the valuation, and they have yet to do it. Is that correct?
That's correct. They've had 2 years to correct it. People have noticed that there are car tabs that just radically skyrocketed. For many people, they've tripled and even quadrupled during that period of time. And contributing to that is that they're not actually valuing vehicles on what they're actually worth. They're doing, let's say your car on Kelley Blue Book is worth $10,000, but they're taxing it as if it's worth $25,000. I mean, that's just fraud. And what our initiative does is it repeals that valuation schedule in its entirety, replaces it with $30, but it says in the future, if they ever try and create a new one, they have to use Kelley Blue Book and not this artificially inflated, manufactured suggested retail price valuation schedule.
Now, in the past, there's been issues with this initiative. Again, we've seen it several times, but there was some problems with it in terms of the courts and things in the past. I take it this one is clean. It's a single subject. It looks like it passes muster. Are you confident this one sticks?
I really am. I mean, give me enough darts, I'm going to hit the dartboard eventually. I mean, the reality is the voters have voted over and over for it. Each time we've gotten closer and closer to it. But you just can't stop the legislature from creating new taxes and fees on vehicles. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with the voters getting rid of those taxes and fees with a subsequent law. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're just repealing all the taxes and fees that they've tacked on over the years. Kind of think of it like barnacles on a ship. You've just got to scrape all those off in order to get down to the main boat. And that's what this new initiative does. It's all about vehicles, doesn't get into any other issues. And we make sure that just everybody in the state of Washington, if you have a vehicle below 10,000 pounds, you're going to pay $30 to register your vehicle.
Now, this year in the legislative session, the original transportation plan included a gas tax increase, probably more tab increases, all kinds of costs, including a carbon tax, and yet that's one of the only things they didn't tax. That's one that didn't materialize. Do you think this particular initiative might have scared them off a little bit?
I absolutely believe that's the case. I mean, there's always that danger where you're the rooster taking credit for the dawn. But I think it's pretty clear that they would have raised all those vehicle charges if our initiative hadn't qualified. The fact that it was on the ballot this November, and I kept testifying at all the hearings saying, all you're doing is kicking a hornet's nest. I mean, what are you doing? You're raising car tabs and raising vehicle charges at a time where the voters are about to tell you that they don't want to be paying more for that. I think we beat those back. I think we also beat back the per mile charge that they want to start hitting on us, because it's pretty clear that this initiative is going to send a clear message that we're tapped out. We already have one of the highest gas taxes in the nation. If they can't make do with that, that's their problem, not ours.
Yeah, I think the per mile thing, I got to tell you, when I put that up on Facebook, it gets more reaction than anything short of maybe the income tax. It is an idea that particularly people in Eastern Washington do not like. I think the other thing that you may have held them off on, it's been a couple of years, they have talked about raising the property tax limit from that 1% that you took care of a few years ago, and yet this year again they failed to do that. I was a little surprised. I thought this would be the year, but you must have caught them on the run, huh?
Well, I think the reality is Olympia is the most dangerous when they don't think we're watching. And as long as you show up at the hearings and then make a stink about what they're trying to do, you're in a much stronger position in order to be able to stop that. It's the days you don't show up. That's the days where they're the most dangerous. And I think that when it comes to the cap on property taxes, I mean, property taxes are still out of control, even with the 1% limit. But imagine it could be like 6 times higher if it wasn't for the passage of that initiative. Vehicle tabs, the same thing. I don't like the fact that people are paying 80 or 100 or 120, but it's a heck of a lot better than it used to be. It used to be $800, $900, $1,000 per vehicle. So we're clearly making progress. I just think that at the end of the day, it's a constant tug of war that we're in. They're always going to want to raise taxes, and we have to be there in order to beat those kind of efforts back. And that's why I think $30 tabs being on this November's ballot is so helpful, because I think people are going to be able to express their wrath about all sorts of taxes this November when they vote on $30 tabs.
Well, and speaking of taxes, they did raise an awful lot of taxes in Olympia, and I want to talk about that in just a minute, but let's circle back one more time. A 747 is holding. $30 tabs is back in sight. So you have really been able to hold these things really well. $30 tabs, though, I want to go back one more time and say, when did it start? What year was it? 99? Is that correct? Or 2000?
Actually, well, it's 1998 was the first time we actually tried to qualify for the ballot. We fell short. And then the following year, in 1999, we started finding people like this crazy guy named Kerry Kandata over in Wenatchee, where he was absolutely just, instrumental in helping us get it qualified. There were Kerry Kandatas throughout the state of Washington, and we managed to get 500,000 signatures, all volunteer. In 1999, literally 20 years ago, we got that first initiative qualified for the ballot. And just as a golden oldie, I got an actual original 695 campaign sign, and I still love this slogan. It says, "Because politicians will never limit taxes." It's 20 years later, and it's pretty obvious that that sentiment is still true, and if anything, it's actually gotten worse.
That's a slogan that has certainly lived the test of time, Tim. There's no question about it. And I do remember gathering those signatures and the 747 signatures. Yes. And guess what? It's all happening 20 years later. We're going to take a quick break and come back with Tim Eyman to talk about Initiative 1648, one of the boldest, most dynamic ideas we've seen in years. And it's out there right now. We'll talk about it when we return to the 12th District. Well, it was a heavy tax season in Olympia. They really laid it on to the tune of $27 billion in new taxes calculated over 10 years, especially when they already had record revenues and about a $3.5 billion surplus. It's pretty fascinating. And Tim, I suspect that got you a little revved up, and look what happened. Initiative 1648 is out there ready for signature. Tell me a little bit about what it does.
Well, it's really neat. It's Initiative 1648. We call it term limits for new taxes. And the whole idea behind the initiative is that we're going to allow the people of the state of Washington, with this one initiative, to be able to veto or term limit all the tax increases that they passed. They have one thing in common that ties them all together. All of them were unilaterally imposed in Olympia. They were not put on the ballot and let the people vote on it. Last January, I filed this initiative that just said, hey, we want to have term limits on tax increases, but any tax increases they pass in 2019 without a vote of the people, the voters get to veto those. It's a great initiative. It's impactful. And I never had any idea that they would raise taxes this much. But 11 different tax increases costing $27 billion over the next 10 years. The voters have the chance to be able to rip all those away and be able to send these guys back to the drawing board and say, you guys are nuts. You had nearly $4 billion in extra revenue, and you guys decide to raise taxes $27 billion. I mean, the voters are furious about it, and I think they're looking for a chance to take those back.
Well, let's put this just in perspective. We did this a week or two ago, and a lot of people commented on it. In 1985, the budget was around $8 billion. It was at $16 billion in 1995, 15 to $16 billion. In 2005, when I started in the legislature, it was $23.5 billion, and here we are at $53 billion. That is striking, and that is a 17.5% increase. Tim, I don't think this is sustainable, do you?
It's completely unsustainable under any circumstances. And the reality is the initiatives like this are the only way you're ever going to get Olympians to pay attention. I mean, they were doing these tax increases on the last weekend, many times without hearings, many times without legislators even reading the bills. I mean, this is what happens when the Democrats completely control the House, the Senate, and the governorship. It's just like they were a bunch of alcoholics that just finally fell off the wagon and finally got the chance to drink as much as they wanted. And they went absolutely, completely bonkers raising taxes. I mean, there were 11 different tax increases. Our initiative gives the voters this November, if we can collect enough signatures from now until July 5th, where we can veto all of them. And there's nothing that's going to get Olympia's attention more than a full-on repudiation of all their tax increases with this initiative. So just real quick, this is what it looks like, just term limits on new taxes. You're helping tremendously on the east side of the state. We're working hard on the people on the west side, but we have a very short time frame to get the signatures to be able to get this thing on the ballot. We have from now until July 5th to get those signatures, but people don't even know how many taxes there were, and I told you we're going to go through those.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to mention a few of them. There's 11 of them, as you said, but they really cover the whole gamut. You've got payroll taxes through the Long-Term Care Act, another payroll tax on top of all the other ones they put in. We've got a REIT tax. That's a very expensive. It's a double or triple tax increase on particularly commercial sales. Commercial buildings would be hit really hard with this. A fuel
Right,
tax.
and real quick, a REIT is real estate excise tax. It's essentially the sales tax when you sell your property or when you buy property. And so you're just radically increasing the cost that people are going to have to pay for rent and for buying property. That's just huge what they ended up getting. The payroll tax just hits everybody that has a job. So that's huge. That was like an $8 billion tax increase for that one. The real estate excise tax was like $3 billion. What were some of the others?
Well, you got they did get a fuel tax in there. They got a wholesale fuel tax, so it'll probably cost us about 2 or 3 cents a gallon. You've got a couple of bank taxes that hit banks real hard. Here's one that the folks down in Clark County in that area don't like is the out-of-state exemption's gone. If Portland people come over, they're going to pay the tax now. That's a huge increase, and that's going to really hurt businesses on the border, don't you think?
And they won't. The thing is, they're not going to actually travel from Oregon to buy things on the border. They're just not going to come. And so that's going to be devastating to those border counties. And I think the real thing you always have to remember is when they say, well, we're only taxing the banks. No, they're only taxing the customers of the banks. All the service businesses in the state of Washington, all the doctors, the lawyers, the accountants, they did a massive tax increase on them. But it's not on them. It's the customers of doctors, lawyers, and accountants, and painters, and people that do services. So there's no such thing as a tax on businesses. The businesses pass it on to the customers. We're the ones who are going to have to pay.
Well, I think you're talking about the B&O tax increase, which is huge. The B&O tax is already the best kept secret in Washington State. Whether these companies make a dollar or a dime or whatever they make, doesn't matter. It's taxed on the gross. And it is a big money maker for the state. Now they've increased it dramatically on a lot of these service businesses. But the one that bothers me the most, Tim, and we fought against it for years, is another property tax increase. And it's twofold. They did not renew the reduction in the state property tax, so that's 30 cents per thousand. And then at the last minute, they raised the levy. The levy that McCleary said clearly had to come down, they take it back to $2.50. That's $1 a thousand. That's $500 for the average house over here. That is the one that really gets me, and this definitely repeals that as well. That's what you're telling me.
Absolutely. What the initiative says is that any taxes that they impose without a vote of the people, those go away. And boy, I'm telling you, property taxes, they just are going to skyrocket unless we yank this thing back. They've already gone up dramatically for the people of the state of Washington. And what this legislative session did was just radically increase it even more. And what this initiative does is it basically says, if you don't like what Olympia is doing or has done, this is the best way to get their attention. I mean, we're talking about a real swift kick in the shins to all the people down in Olympia that allowed these kind of tax increases to go through. 11 different tax increases, $27 billion, and they're going to hit you every which way. But what's even scarier is if they get away with this, passing taxes, this many of them, without any kind of pushback, the next few legislative sessions, they don't have to have hearings. We don't have to read the bills anymore. This is the new rule now in Olympia. We just don't have to be held accountable at all. We have to send a very, very emphatic message that this kind of legislating is not acceptable. And the only way to do that is with 1648. So it's givethemnothing.com. That's givethemnothing.com is our website where you can download a petition. You can email me directly. It's 30tabs@gmail.com. That's 30tabs@gmail.com. So I'm just begging people to help us get it qualified for the ballot. The Liberty people are jumping all over this thing. The 51st State people are all over it. The Second Amendment people are jumping on it. But you need 300,000 signatures in about 6 weeks. It's a huge undertaking. But if we can get it there, I think people are just hungry to be able to pass this thing.
Well, the way I like to put it is if, 1,000 people got 322 signatures apiece, you'd be there. Now, that's not insurmountable in a state with 7 million people. It should be doable. But I'll tell you what, the thing that scares me is, and why this is so important to me, is because we haven't seen the income tax yet, the capital gains tax yet, an increase in the inheritance tax, and they're still coming back for a carbon tax at some point. They have not even begun. There's projections that this budget could go well over $60 billion in just the next few years. So this is really the only way to put the brakes on the freight train, Tim.
Absolutely. And you think about it from the Republican perspective, just to be partisan for a second. I mean, if you don't like the fact that we've had a governor who's from the Democratic Party for the last 30 years, if you don't like the fact that the House and the Senate are controlled by basically Seattle centric politicians, how else are you going to be able to change the track of what's going on down there? Right now, they feel kind of fat and happy. They've passed a bunch of tax increases. They haven't really paid a price for it. You get an initiative like this one on the ballot, and the voters have a chance to repudiate all 11 of them, plus pass their $30 tabs on top of it. I mean, this is full-on tax revolt. This is like Prop 13 down in California in the 70s. This is like 695 in 1999 in Washington State. I mean, this is a chance to be able to change the direction of the state of Washington for all time. You take away $27 billion in higher taxes, they can't ignore that.
Well, that's for sure. Well, listen, let's get the contact information one more time, Tim, and we're going to have you back on before the end of this, before the signatures are due, to see how you're doing. But this is a big one, and let's tell people how they can get involved.
Yeah, again, it's givethemnothing.com, and it's givethemnothing.com, and again, it's 30 tabs at gmail.com. And the quick thing I'd say is that we passed this initiative, suddenly $27 billion goes away, and then the Democrats in 2020 has an entire legislative session where they've got to cut spending in order to be able to accommodate the passage of this initiative just before they run for re-election in November of 2020. This is an opportunity for the Republicans to be able to gain dramatic amounts of seats in the House and the Senate in 2020 and the governorship if we are actually successful with this initiative. This puts us on a path to fundamentally change the direction of our state and not let Seattle be constantly making all the decisions for us.
And I think, Tim, last but not least, what people have to remember, it's not all about just taxes. Some of the policies, sanctuary state policies, this long-term care act, even though it is a tax, just the policy is horrible. A lot of the policies that were passed this year in Olympia are horrible. And so it's really bigger than taxes. But this is where you specialize and where you've done so well. And we thank you for being here. We thank you for all your work. I know you've had some difficult times lately. I wish you the best. Good old Bob Ferguson, your buddy there, is, he is what he is. And I don't know what to say about the way they've treated you, Tim, but I hope you get through it just fine. And I hope this really puts the crown jewel on the top of everything. So,
well, qualify this initiative for the ballot. What a great way to send a message to Bob Ferguson that he can't stop us from doing what we're doing. And we're allowing the people to vote, have a greater say in their government, and to put limited government on the agenda, because right now the Democrats are never going to look at that agenda. This is the best way to do it in lieu of having more Republicans being elected down there.
There you have it, folks. Tim Eyman. We'll get him back in a couple of weeks to see how he's doing. We'll be right back with the 12th District. Stay tuned. Well, there you have it, folks. Tim Eyman back at it 20 years later on $30 tabs. Pretty amazing. That's how I started my political career, was getting signatures for those $30 tabs. Then consequently, 747, the property tax initiative, which has been a lifesaver for folks here in Eastern Washington. Can you imagine what property taxes would be if they'd increased 5 to 6% every year? They're high enough already. We'll be back next week to talk a little bit more about 1648 and start to dive into some of the other measures that and other bills that were signed that were also very controversial. We'll give you the information right here on the 12th District every week. It is time to take a look at the national scene, too, at some point. Boy, what a crazy situation that has become. We'll dedicate a whole show to that, too, in the near future. Right now, we want to thank you for listening. We want you to remember that you can get these shows on demand. Tell your friends if they want to see a specific subject or show. Just go to ncwlife.com and dial up the 12th District. You'll see an on-demand section, and you can get our episodes all the way back a long ways. The McCleary episode's still one of the most popular ever seen, and there are several others on the budget if you want to see more of a breakdown on that. On demand, great way to watch the 12th District. Tell your friends they can get it on their computer. All right, Kerry Condata for NCW Life. We'll be back next week with more on Initiative 1648 and a few other surprises.